Welcome to West of Tulsa. I'm CJ Ward, and we are broadcasting from Studio 3 in Ventura, California. Pretty much the whole crew's here. Helm is missing today. But we got Beth, we got Gabe, we got Dan, and we have a great show for you because Dana Newquist is joining us, and we got Bruce Terry. Now, Dana, how do I describe you? I mean, I want to say you're a classic car collector, but you're so many more things. You're with the local chapter president of AACA. You're always working on some kind of crazy project, and you wrote Bruce into this latest project called Platypus. Bruce, you're a metal fabricator, master metal fabricator, or just fabricator? How should we define you?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Was I close?
Well, I consider myself more or less a sculptor.
Oh, there we go.
And
that's true.
Yeah, there's definitely sculpting elements in it.
Yeah. And how about, was I close with you, Dana?
Well, I've been interested in cars and collecting cars all my life. My older brother, when I was maybe 5 or 6, he was 10 years older than I was, and he had a group of his buddies. And when he was 15, anticipating getting his driver's license, he bought a 1940 Plymouth 4-door. I mean, I think he paid $20 for it. It had a dead engine, and all these guys got together to put a new engine in it. And I was totally fascinated by this process.
And how old were you again?
5 or 6.
Okay, 5 or 6, wow.
So I got to learn what the sizes of wrenches and different kinds of screwdrivers. And of course, back then, there was no such thing as Phillips screwdrivers. They were all flat blade. Anyway, so I was very excited to work with these men and put this together. And on its first Virgin ride, the guys, it was a 4-door. It was, anyway, so they got it running. They were all excited. And they were going through town, and this is a suburb of Chicago. It's called Glen Ellen. They got up on the crest of a railroad track, and the engine died.
Oh, yuck.
And then the gates started coming down.
Oh, no.
And these guys were panicking, as I was. And 3 of them got out and pushed it across the tracks. Anyway, of course, nothing really happened other than the scare of the moment.
So the adrenaline rush is why you're now doing what you're doing. And you just, the rush of, I don't know, what you're going to get down the road is part of the...
That's what started it.
Yeah, that's what started
the near-death experiences.
Wow.
Yeah.
At 5 years old.
Yeah, incredible.
5 or 6 or whatever. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. So
At that age, did you learn the language of the mechanics back in the day in garage talk?
you know, when you're a young kid, you're trying to pick up everything, you know. So if they were talking in Latin, I would have picked that up, but of course they weren't. So yeah, I mean, I learned about transmissions and engines and carburetors, etc.
So Dana has a pretty amazing collection. And what I like about your collection is it's a little bit of everything, and there's no rhyme or reason to it, and I love it. And Platypus, which if you've been following any of our social medias, you've seen Platypus. Crazy thing. Started off as an airplane, 1948 airplane, and now these two guys are reimagining it. So, Bruce, Dana roped you in on this. Talk a little bit about Platypus. The first time Dana approached you and said, hey, I got this project for you.
Well, I more or less decided to try to retire a little bit, slow down the process. I had a shop in Monterey where I was doing 5 or 6 projects at one time, and I turned 65 or so. So I decided to attempt to retire and just kind of finish up a few cars that I had going at the time. And then I didn't really plan on doing any outside commercial work. But he walked in, and I just liked his character, his enthusiasm in the first place. And
did you two know each other before that?
No.
Oh, wow.
We met through Seth and a couple other people up in Santa Barbara that I had done work for. And so his enthusiasm was overwhelmingly appreciated by me. And he said, "You got to come over to this museum and look at this fuselage that I picked up in San Paulo Airport."
A fuselage. Yeah,
Yeah,
check out
so-
this fuselage.
That
Why are
sounds like
we looking at
retirement.
Why are we looking at a fuselage? And so I walked in there, and there at set, when the set of wheels and an engine and a couple pieces, I go, well, he said, I want to turn this into a car. I want to make this a car, a drivable car.
And up to this point, you're thinking, oh, he's a pilot, right?
I had no idea, but so the enthusiasm was so high, and it was an interesting project. It was not a restoration project, which is kind of refreshing because restorations are everything is predetermined by the designers and the fabricators, like how everything put together. This one was an open book, so it was creatively interesting for me.
What era is the fuselage? And does that kind of lend itself to you artistically?
40s.
Oh.
But yeah, the Art Deco design concepts that I've tried to put into this car.
Beautiful.
Yeah, what I was going to say was it just, since being at their shop and seeing what they're doing, you guys just dream it up and then give it a shot.
Yeah.
Is that kind of is that fair to say? Just, here's what we can do with this, and let's see if we can make it work.
It's like a dream, constantly being evolved as time goes on.
Dana, did you know of Bruce before you reached out to him, or did you just found out about him and then reach out to him, or?
No, I mean, luckily we've got connections all over the place, and I was looking for, at first, this was going to be a 3-wheel vehicle. And I had bought a frame for it. I bought an engine for it. And I had Daniel Vesa, and I don't know if you've met him, but Daniel Vesa was a instructor over at Art Center. And he knows Chip, and he knows Seth and a number of other people. So I started working with Daniel. He made some renderings of what was going to be the Platypus. Although when Bruce came over to inspect Platypus, I think he made the initial assessment that the aluminum on the body itself was not workable. The aluminum was too old. It would fracture. There were too many problems with it. So taking a leap forward, everything had to change. And I wasn't in anticipation of this, but we're building something from ground up. Everything. I mean, we had to build a custom frame. The entire body is hand formed, everything. And so as we're going through this, and unfortunately, poor Bruce has racks of stuff that I've bought over time thinking, oh, let's put this on there, or let's use this, or whatever. And most of them got the nose. Forget it.
So
That's not going to work.
do you incorporate the original aluminum and just reinforce, or you're scrapping that altogether?
Well, there's a section of the original framework that we're able to use in the front of the car.
One piece.
We were hoping to be able to use some of it, and we were able to use the internal framework on the front of the car. And then there's actually an inner door panel that we're able to use for the one door.
And when you stick your head in, you can see it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It looks like you're looking
Yeah,
at the cockpit
so
of
you
an
can
airplane.
see some elements of the original and the stamping from the original airplane.
So all the pieces that you brought that are on the shelf that he said no to, why did you say no to them? Or why were pieces considered or not considered?
Well, as this was evolving, okay, and the body's taking shape, and then, we thought, wouldn't it be cool to have pontoon fenders on the front, and they articulate with the steering, and then the spears on all the wheels, and all this design features coming into play. And some of those are borrowed from, Art Deco cars, maybe Delages or Bugattis or whatever. So what I was gathering early on just didn't fit what was happening. What we
Part
were
of the
making.
creative process.
Right.
That's just what happens, right?
Right.
I run by the adage of less is better, and adding more things doesn't make things necessarily better.
Sure.
I don't hope I don't offend you by saying this. Does this fall under rat rod category?
Not at all.
Not at all. Not even.
Not at all.
Okay. And then
No barbed wire in this car.
Or rust. The rust.
or pizza trays. And do you just put word out that I am looking for a fuselage because I want to turn an airplane into an automobile? Is that
Not
something you've
not
done
at all.
before?
No. Stephen Butcher had a place over in Santa Paula. Okay. And it was a warehouse, and he built cars and other props for the movie industry.
I think we've met him.
Yeah, and his place is called Funky Junk, and you've been there.
Yep. That's a great.
Anyway, I used to go over and visit his stuff just out of fascination. So I'm over there, this is 10 years ago, and I look up in these rafters, and I see this fuselage. And I said, Stephen, what are you doing with that? He says, oh, I don't know. Someday I'll get to it. Well, 5 years went by. And I said, Stephen, you haven't done anything with that. Can I buy it? Nope. This went on for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. And one day he said, well, maybe. So I said, okay, what's your price? So we settled on a price. And I said, okay, I'll buy it if you take it over to the Murphy Auto Museum. And so that was the fuselage of a 1948 Republic CB amphibious airplane. So, in the 40s and 50s, when this was built, they were used almost exclusively as a seaplane, pretty much in the Seattle up to Alaska. They were used a lot up there. So anyway, that's how I obtained that fuselage. And, we took it from there, which the body was not really usable, nor was the idea about a three-wheeler. And then that's when Chip Foose kind of comes into play here. So I'm thinking about how am I going to power this thing now? And now it's going to be four-wheel, not three. So Chip goes up to Seth Hammond's place often. And so I see him quite often up there. So I said, Chip, I've got this. I show him some pictures, and he goes, wow, what is that? And I said, well, that's Platypus. And he got a chuckle out of that. So I said, Chip, I've got a dilemma. I've got 1,000 different drivetrains that I could use on this. What do you think? And he says, well, it's a 1948 Republic CB airplane. So with respect to that, why don't we go vintage, and why don't we look for a Ford or Mercury flathead V8 of that vintage? I said, well, okay. So what we did, we sourced a 1948 Mercury flathead, and we tied it to a C4 automatic transmission. So the drivetrain is mid-engine, and you sit right in front of that engine and transmission. And the positioning is quite unique. So
everything's quite unique.
Yeah, we're hoping to have a nice balance on this vehicle.
Yeah. No, it looks great. And have you guys heard it run? I would imagine the
I've
sound.
heard the engine run.
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
we've
That-
tested that.
It's gonna be. I mean, I love the sound of a 48 Merc. I mean, it's going to have that nice rumble to it.
Dana, could I ask? I'm curious about did you or Bruce, or did you commission, have any sort of artist rendering? Because the car, I've seen, I shot the video for the car. It's a very distinct aesthetic. It's very unique looking. It's everyone that I've shown the video to is like, whoa, I've never seen anything like that. Did you have like an artist, or did Bruce do sketches? I don't know if you're an artist, Bruce, is in that aspect as far as sketching. Are there any sketches that exist of Platypus as it's become?
Well, the beginning of it with starting with Daniel Vesa, he had done some sketches, which were quite interesting. But if you saw those sketches, and I have them, to where we are today, they're very different.
Yeah, so that was the genesis of it, but
Right.
But
So
you tweaked it.
well, the biggest factor that we were trying to understand is, where are we going to put the front wheels with respect to the body? Because we've got to have a certain turning radius. And that evolved into, okay, we want to make this thing really cool somehow. So not only the turning radius and where you put the front axle to gain that turning radius, but also, what about putting pontoons over those wheels to make it look very streamlined? So I would hesitate to tell you how much each one of those pontoons cost, so I won't.
Well, and what's interesting is the pontoon, when you see the video, it's kind of splits right in the middle of the pontoon, and that's how the wheel turns. Who came up with that idea? Because that's pretty clever.
Well, we started out with designing the rears. So the rears have a nice, long, elongated shape from the 40s, kind of Art Deco-y shapes. And then, of course, to go to the front, with the problem with the turning radius and the frame and everything, in order to get the same, to repeat the same general design, and typically what they've done in a lot of other cars that they've built is they build a fender that's very broad. So there's a little teeny wheel in the side,
Yep.
but it's a bulbous front fender, which to me looks like they're doing it, for the purpose of turning the wheel. It doesn't really flow with the design of the car. So in order to keep the fender thin to match up with the rears, the only way to do that would be to have a split to where the one part stays stationary and the forward part it articulates with the front steering.
But that brings up another problem, which Bruce can address, because you've got this wheel in front, obviously, going up and down. You've got weight when you're putting passengers in the vehicle, plus you've got fuel and other things. And so how do you keep that look streamlined, because you've got all these factors going on? And so why don't you address that, Bruce?
Oh, well, there's a certain spring load, so there's maybe half an inch or an inch up and down when the car's when people are climbing in and out of it. So we have to design it to where when it's empty, sitting at a show, for example, no humans in it, and we're locating the fuel tank in a place where it won't have a big effect on the pressure, so to keep the alignment of the spears. So I'm making the rear half of it an adjustable element to where I can adjust it up and down, back or forth, depending on the circumstances that we end up with.
Wow. Incredible. Nowadays people throw these types of projects at computers and AI. You're
Oh,
doing
yeah.
all of this.
Yeah, I'm
That's
kind
a
of
great
old.
point.
I'm
That's
an
a
old
great
school
point, yeah.
guy. Just kind of,
Yeah.
and then when it's all said and done, once they add the extra weight, maybe I have 120 pounds or something sitting up there right now to illustrate the amount of weight that would be added to it once they take the chassis back and add the additional components.
Well, and then you got to probably figure into it also the ride when it's in motion. Little bumps and
Yeah, well,
that's all got to be factored into it as well, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
There's the old adage they say, especially growing up as a designer, they said form follows function, but it sounds like it's kind of like backwards. Like
Function follows form.
yeah, and that goes back to like the collaboration, because you said you had talked to Daniel and then Chip, and then you got Bruce involved. So this is your project, your idea, but you've had to collaborate with other people, getting input from different people, working with them, but at the end of the day, it's this project. And what leads it more? It's like obviously the look and the form. Would you say the form is first and the function follows that, or just because everything has to work obviously, but you're going off of a specific look, that you're going for the Art Deco 1940s look. Does that determine whether something is yes or a no on the project, or
Well, as you can imagine, this whole thing is a huge experiment. Okay, so, the first thing that comes to my mind is, what is it going to look like? Okay, and then luckily I've got the people responsible to make it work that know what they're doing. So not only Bruce, but I've got Mike Gossard and his son, who are doing most of the mechanical stuff and all the electrical stuff on it. So we've got that pretty well figured out. But, even a car that's produced by a major manufacturer, they run into problems.
Yeah.
And as you know, and you don't find those out until actually function. Mm-hmm. So, this is going to be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a CHP officer there as a consultant also to make sure it's street legal when it's all said and done? Just to help.
We don't want anybody legal there. No, not at all.
that's not rotting. That's not hot rodding.
However, that's interesting you asked that. I already have the plates for it and the title.
Oh, okay.
I have it.
How the integration of the plates onto the car? I would imagine that's probably you gotta, you don't have 40s plates on it, or do you have 40s plates?
Do not. And those plates are actually going to be hidden unless pulled over. We'll
You'll deal with that when you get
I have a feeling
stopped.
that might happen at some point, maybe once.
Out of curiosity, they get pulled over out of curiosity. It's like,
Yeah.
what is that?
What-
Oh yeah, the first thing out of the office mouth is, "What is this? Where are you from?"
The airport's that way. Yeah.
Is it a parade float? What is this thing?
Hey, well, planes fall from the sky all the time.
Tires sure do. It's just the other day.
Kind of a bad joke from the news this morning, but the airplane wheel
Yes.
fell off the jet.
Yeah.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
So as you're putting this all together, and I think we'd all agree that the form, is first, and what the look of the car is going to be at the end of the day, and then make everything working around the form. So you have this balance of science and engineering with artistry, and creativity, and it seems like the creativity leads everything else. Does that sound pretty fair?
Well, if you go back in history and you say, okay, some of these manufacturers way back when, they had old technology as far as the drivetrain, but in order to sell cars, they had to have something that was flashy that people would buy. They'd say, oh, I like the way that looks. And then, how it ran or whatever was an afterthought. We're trying to put the whole package together somehow. Mm-hmm. And so, reaching back into what I like the pre-war stuff. Almost all my stuff is pre-war. So this kind of has an Art Deco look to it, which I love. Mm-hmm. Okay, and one of the details that probably took another long period of time, I wanted a stabilizer on the back, a fin, okay, because I just think those are cool. And so we spent hours on what that fin was going to look like, what the height was going to be. And so we've kind of settled on that, but that took a lot of thought and detail. So we wanted to keep that in the realm and style of the vehicle itself.
Mm-hmm.
How much fun are you guys having through this process?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
How much fun are you guys having?
Oh, I'm having a great time. I think Dana's enjoying himself too.
Yeah.
I mean, we
Sounds
wouldn't
like
be
it.
doing it if it wasn't fun.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't need to do it, and I don't need to do
Right.
it.
Well, I mean, you can just hear it. I mean, when you guys telling the story,
Oh,
how
yeah.
fun you guys are having, just
Yeah.
trying stuff out and different things, and the reaction when people see it, and
Well, as you go through life in the automotive realm and you're trying to create something, I don't care if it's a rebuild of an old car or whatever, oftentimes you'll find whoever you're dealing with And, you know, you've got many crafts. You've got the mechanical side, you've got the body side, paint, and so forth. Oftentimes you find the person or people that you're working with kind of lose interest in what you're doing. And what's exciting about this is there's always excitement. What's it going to be like? How is it going to run? You know, what kind of reaction are people going to have to this? And, you know, and I've shown the project to Jay Leno also. And I got the similar reaction by him looking at it, like, what is this? And so I anticipate, and he and I'm supposed to see him in about 2 weeks, but he may choose this to have on one of his shows.
That'd be fun.
Oh yeah.
But we're about a year away.
Okay, that was gonna be a question. How close are you?
A year.
About a year.
And how long to get to this point have you been into this project?
4 years.
4
Oh,
years.
it's been 4 years.
Actually, 3.5.
Oh my God.
Bruce is counting.
He's marking every day off his calendar.
My checkbook is counting.
One thing I love about you, your enthusiasm, I agree with you. You know, I think when you and I first met, I don't know if you remember this, I was at a business meeting at Harry's, and whoever I was talking to had left for just a second. And you practically came and sat on my lap, and you wanted to talk to me about something. And I thought, okay.
I remember that.
I remember that too.
I thought you sat on my lap.
No.
Oh, wait a minute. Now, that's not what the version I heard.
I'm uncomfortable.
It's your enthusiasm just for events and all things that have to do with people. And a lot of it does center around your vehicles, your chitty chitty bang bang that we have the honor of driving, except for last year for the parade 4th of July in Montecito, and your fire truck that you bring every year to the Christmas events and to the Unity Parade, Unity Shop Telethon. Yeah. I mean, all these things, and they just bring so much joy to so many people. You know, it's beautiful what you do.
Well, I have more fun than anybody. I mean, I'm at the wheel and I'm seeing all these screaming kids in back of me, and you know, it puts me in my childhood, which is great.
Yeah. That's really cool. So, when we were over at the shop shooting the video of the platypus at your shop, that's your shop, right, Bruce?
Right.
I noticed in the back of your shop, you have looks like a recording studio and a lot of instruments, and you play instruments. You're a musician as well.
Yes.
What instruments do you play?
Mostly guitars and harmonica and some drums. So.
And when we were there, when I was asking you about the recording studio, I was like, would you equate the fabrication that you do with music? You know, playing a guitar versus getting on your English wheel and stuff like that. And you said, yes, there's a lot of similarities. Can you elaborate on that, how you see the similarities between the two?
Well, there was an interesting thing that I was going to attempt to record about 10, 15 years ago. When I'm forming panels, especially with aluminum, you actually get a tone that starts to whistle, you know, and it changes as you're moving across the panel.
Oh, wow.
From a lower tone to a higher tone. And I always wanted to record that. I never quite got around to doing it, but it's interesting. And I thought about doing a video where the sounds of the planishing and hammering and all that, and mixed together with the sounds of the metal whistling and whispering to you when you're forming it, and put it all together in an interesting video. But I never got around to doing that.
Is those tones that you're talking about is that usually a good sign that you're looking for those kinds of tones when you're
they're just happening metal? And you don't even know, you're not quite sure why, other than you're getting closer to the end of the panel where they're actually starting to get higher pitched. So there is a audio thing going on when you're rolling.
So that's something that you have to develop over time, a skill, because you couldn't learn that in a book, right? What that tone is, or when you're shaping that metal, correct?
Well, working with an English wheel is an art form for sure that takes just many, many years. I got a little bit of early training, but mostly just been trial and error.
Will you just elaborate? You and I were speaking before we started taping, and how long you've been doing all of this. And I'm curious what your favorite medium is to work with.
Well, I've been doing this since I was like 18. I got into just metal at about 25, and I was doing paint and other things prior to that. But I'm sorry, what was your second question?
Just what type of medium? What type of material do you
Well, I've grown into loving aluminum or aluminium for the
Over the last 3.5
forced
years.
that.
Now, I was working in a lot of steel in the earlier days because I was doing the 36, 37, 540K Mercedes bodies, and they're all steel bodies. Most of the German made cars are steel bodies, but except with the 300 SL, whatever, it's got some components, hanging parts that are aluminum. So I started doing 300 SLs about 10, 15 years ago. And I really loved working with the aluminum components. And so then I started getting into aluminum race cars, solid body aluminum. And then, of course, when he came up with an aluminum car, it just fell right into place. It's like a type of material I really love working with.
So going back to like your shop and the music aspect of this, I kind of vision this everything coming back to art, right? And music is an art form. Like you said, you're not a fabricator, you're a sculptor, right? You sculpt metal, in which you've created Platypus. You've sculpted this shape out of nowhere, basically. You know, you have some inspiration, but you created this thing, and you're one component, a big component of this build, as well as other people that are involved with this. And Dana, you seem to be more like the conductor of this orchestra. You're putting this symphony together and making, because I mean, one, yes, you're writing the checks, but you're also, you know, determining who gets to work on it, who's qualified, and who's best for this project. You know, would you just
Well, I've given Bruce a lot of freedom in that I didn't see the value of lowering or taking out 2 inches off the body of the fuselage itself, because as it was higher, it didn't give the kind of the slipstream effect that we wanted. So Bruce went ahead and lowered the actual body by 2 inches.
Yeah.
Which really made it give me the look that I wanted. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know he was doing that. And another part of it was, okay, how are we going to fashion the dashboard? We want it to be
Aeronautical
airplane-like. And I bought dozens of gauges to put in there. So Bruce went ahead and built the dashboard, which is very cool. And you've got, what is it, an inclinometer right in the middle, you know? And so everything is done, I'd say, very beautifully, but so creatively. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot thanks to Bruce over here.
Bruce, when you're building something like that, are you building and thinking like, oh, this is what Dana's looking for, and then in collaboration with what you think is going to be good for the project? So is it, you have that balance of, you know, you're working with your client and also for the car, basically. Do you have that in mind while you're putting that together for somebody like Dana?
I'm just primarily focusing on what I find visually attractive myself, and then I run it by him. Mm-hmm. Here's an idea. Here's something I come up with, and most often he walks up and says, "I love it." So just go with it.
Except for the center fin, right? That was
we've been working on that.
We're still working on it.
It's a miracle that's the only thing we've ever had any kind of conversation about. Like, are you sure? And I keep on whittling it down.
So there's a level of trust.
Absolutely.
Say, right?
You have to.
Yeah.
You have to have that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because with any collaboration, I don't care if it's cars or anything else, building a house or whatever, you have to have a relationship with the people that you're working with. And would you say that's the key to what the success that you've had of this build so far, is the relationships that you have with everybody on the project?
Oh, yeah. And, you know, that spills over to the mechanical side of things also. And, you know, the engine, transmission, where things are going to be positioned, what the functionality is going to be, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot to think about. And, you've really got to have confidence in who you're dealing with.
How do you? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, how do you how do you find out about that? Obviously, with time, but when you're initially engaging with Bruce or whoever you have on the project, what helps you determine whether I'm going to go with that guy or I'm not going to go with that guy?
Well, luckily, having interest in the automotive field for years and years and years, you get a pool of people out there that you trust as experts. Mm-hmm. So, those that you really trust, if you're lucky, you go to them and you ask them for advice, just like I did with Chip. And that turned out to be a good call. And Mike Gossard has helped me restore 30 or 40 cars. Oh. And so I've watched his talents. I understand he knows everything about suspensions, engines, transmissions, etc. Many things that I don't understand. So I trust him for some of those things, those parts. And then together, collaboratively, with Daniel Vesa and Chip Foose. And anyway, we're coming together with what I think will be a very unique product.
I'm excited. And one thing, we can't have this discussion without talking about Bruce and his homemade English wheel. And talk about that a little bit, because it's a beautiful piece of machinery, but you built it to exactly what you need to do this type of work. So how'd you come up with that idea to build your own English wheel?
I'm more or less out of necessity, because I never actually owned a formal English wheel with cast equipment from the British Isles. They were very expensive, so we used to fabricate our own 30 years ago, and so I made a few myself, and using the plans that I acquired. And then Ron Covell had a bunch of the mechanical stuff that we welded into the framework. But then I built 2 or 3 more of those because I was doing seminars about 15 years ago for metal crafting hands-on seminars. And so we used those in the class. But I always felt uncomfortable with the design of them. I wasn't happy with certain elements, the size, the throat, the depth, and all that. So I decided that I'm going to make myself one. I had a table that we were using in the shop for a long time. I had fabricated something for an elevator, an open elevator with glass, in stainless steel with this panel that it was circular, and it was 3/4 of an inch plate steel, and we'd been using it to eat lunch on. So I told my friends, I need to do something with this piece of metal. So I designed a wheel that fit my qualifications, shorter depth into the throat. The older ones were like 48 inches, and I reduced it down to like 32 inches, and then made the draw deeper. So I just designed it to fit, just from my experience, and drew up the plans, and then made patterns and laid them out on this circular 48-inch diameter, 3/4 inch plate steel, and cut it out with a cutting torch.
Wow.
Then we welded it together and spent. We went through 5 or 6 grinding machines to get the radiuses and everything. So it ends up being 3/4 inch plate steel on each side. So it's got 1.5 inches of solid material, and then cross bracing all the way down through it.
Wow!
But it's tripodic. It was going to be 4-legged. But I decided to one morning and woke up and said, why don't I just come around like this? And so it's the only tripodic English wheel in the world that's custom built. And
do you have a patent on that?
It's my legacy.
Yeah.
Would you say that's the #1 used tool in your shop?
Oh, absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah.
What is the weight of that, Bruce?
It's about 1,100 pounds.
Whoa. Incredible.
So it stays in one spot, right? Yeah,
That actually rolls around. Yeah,
Oh,
you lift
okay.
the front. The back's got wheels on it.
Okay.
So I can wheel it around myself.
Now, if somebody wants to see this, have we got this posted on our YouTube channel? Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right.
The video that we shot at with Bruce and with Dana at the shop is on our YouTube.
Yeah.
channel.
So anybody listening to this on our podcast, if you
Yeah.
want to see any of this,
Yeah, you definitely got to see it.
Platypus, and
It's worth watching the video
It
because
is.
it's pretty extraordinary.
we spent maybe an hour and a half at your shop a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I
a
mean,
month ago.
looking at Platypus and then looking at the tool that built Platypus is like you rarely get to see stuff like that, and it brings me to a interesting point about the English wheel and just this type of project alone. Looking into the future, do you see this becoming a dying art form or process, or do you think this will continue? I mean, what are your thoughts on the future of this type of work on these type of projects from either one of you?
Well, I think Bruce can address that better than I can. But what I find in restoration of cars is all these trades are going away. Body shops, if I were to take an old car and say, okay, I want to repaint this, I want, you to strip it, sandblast it or whatever, almost all body shops will say, nope, won't do that. They want production work. They want stuff in and out. So they know that an old car is going to take them months to complete, sometimes years. So they don't want that kind of work. To them, that's more of a hassle than it's worth.
Insurance claims, crank them in, crank
That's
them
it.
out. Yeah.
That's it. That's all they want. So, I mean, that goes to rebuilding of gauges. Plating is a huge problem. So a lot of platers, all of them have left California pretty much.
For most people who may be listening may not understand, you're talking about chrome.
You're
You're talking about the metal chrome. If
Yes.
you want to have something refinished,
Yes.
hard to find anybody who does it anymore.
Yeah, so a lot of shops send it out to Mexico too.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It kind of reiterates the importance of mentoring. This is something we spoke about a
Yes.
couple of weeks ago with Kevin Haberly
Yep.
Yeah.
and all the work that he and his group are doing with students and talking about auto shop. leading
Yeah.
And Dana,
schools.
you've been part of that with Kevin. You've been working
Yeah.
with him. Yeah.
And you had your own auto shop when you were 5 years old, as you just told us.
I did, yes.
It's so important to be learning from others,
Do you think that's along the lines of the people that you run into in your business, Bruce, as far as carrying on that legacy? Do you feel like is there anybody that you know of or can think of, including yourself, that are willing to, pay it forward and teach the next generation, or do you not see that at all?
I've kind of lost track of what the demand for that sort of thing is. 20 years ago, when there was a big hot rod surge, there was a lot of interest in going to seminars, but it appears to be kind of resurfacing, kind of a little renaissance going on. My biggest dream in life is to see a renaissance in the country from almost every perspective you can think of. Which is, taking a look backwards at what we've accomplished in the world and how we've done it, and the craftsmanship and the technologies just seems to be running rampant. But I also think there's a group of people that are looking back at what we're missing out of our culture, and whatever I could do to add to that, I would. And as a matter of fact, I did seminars for 5 years or so. One of my very best friends, Ron Covell's, still doing seminars all over the world. So there is a resurgence of interest. And I'm considering starting up a little school myself.
That would be awesome.
That'd be awesome.
You know who would love this conversation? Do you know who I'm thinking of?
I can think of quite a few people.
Richard Keller,
My grandfather, yes.
who started west of Tulsa.
Absolutely.
And this museum. That's exactly the spirit of what he was trying to accomplish with this building.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's everything that is in this building is representative of that. The exact same thing.
So when you were sitting there talking, I'm thinking, oh boy, Richard would love to be sitting in that seat right there listening to this conversation.
Maybe he is.
Yeah, maybe he is.
Maybe he is. Yeah. Yeah.
He's here
Yeah, he's here.
in us.
Right there.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we should start some field trips to your spot.
Yeah, yeah.
Start bringing them in. I think it would be really
Oh,
awesome.
hey, we didn't ask the obvious question. We addressed it in our video. Platypus.
Oh, the name?
The name.
Oh, yeah.
What was the inspiration for the name?
I wanted something very unique that a car had never been branded before. I mean, you've got thousands of names for cars. And I thought, I want something very unusual and unique that people maybe remember, especially me as I get old. Anyway, so Platypus came out of somewhere, and Mike Gossard hated that name. What the heck what is this? And I said, I don't know, I like it. And that's what it's going to be. So here we are.
And you think it'll stay that way? You think it's
Yeah,
never going to
well,
change? It's just going to stay as Platypus?
As Bruce knows,
Bruce is
Smiling.
as Bruce knows, I was looking, and sometimes I look for days and hours and weeks and for different parts of the vehicle just to give it some kind of significance. So I'm online and I see a Lalique of what looks like Rocket Man, okay? And nobody in their right mind would take a beautiful Lalique, cut the base off of it, and then tap it to be a nose piece for an unusual car. But that's exactly what we did.
It looks great.
I love it.
Yeah, even Bruce likes it. Yeah, you can tell Bruce. That's one of the ones he accepted, right? He goes, okay. We can work with this.
Yeah, and then everybody who sees that says, are you going to light it? You included.
I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have multiple lights going on there.
Well, the other thing, and I think you asked this question when we were standing next to it. Gabe, I think, asked you, are you going to put, in the old style of like a World War II B-17 or something, you're going to put like a little platypus artwork on the front nose, kind of like what they did with the old bombers or anything like that? Or
I don't think so.
Just keep it the way it is.
Bruce said something that's very significant, I think, here, and less is more sometimes.
Yeah, there you go.
And I think it is so sleek in its look, I don't think you need more stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's beautiful the way it is. I mean, what you guys have accomplished in 3.5 years is pretty amazing.
And it'll be all metal. There will be no paint on the car, correct?
No paint.
No paint.
Not if I have it my way.
No. Don't want paint.
Yeah.
And the other obvious question, how soon will it be ready? And will we see it on the streets?
About a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It's not long.
most people that I know, myself included, that have projects going on for many, many years can't stick with one project. Do you have another one going on or planning on another one?
I have too many.
Yeah. That's I knew it.
I do.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Well, just to give you a sense, so you rebuilt a Franklin, right?
Many.
That was, well, the last one I saw, the whole thing was pretty much shot. The photos, you couldn't even tell it was a car. Now it looks like a Franklin. Which one is that? Which year is that?
That was the 25 boat tail.
That's it. 25 boat tail Franklin. Then you built a recreation Bugatti?
Oh, the Talbot.
Talbot, that's what it is. So that's pretty cool. I've driven in that. That thing drives beautifully. You got the fire truck. You've got Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. That's a story we could do an entire hour just on Chitty Bang Bang. Go to our website because did I do something on Chitty?
You did.
I did. I wrote up an article on Chitty.
Yeah, it's on our blog.
Yeah, it's on our website at westtulsa.com, so you can read on that. But that's Dana's. That's one of his dreams.
So do you keep all the projects? Do you sell them? Do you route charity? What do you have them all still?
It's interesting. You buy a car that you really think you got to have, okay, and you work with it. Sometimes you rebuild it, play with it, and then sometimes you lose interest in that vehicle.
Yeah.
And that's happened many times. So, and then if I lose interest in a vehicle, I switch to another one. So it's an evolving thing, and my wife, she doesn't understand me, but that's okay.
I know the feeling.
So
I knew that was coming.
so she and collecting cars, old cars, I mean, you run into multiple problems because of their age, storage, insurance. It's just so they all take lots of attention. Probably one of my favorite cars is the 1917 Templar.
Oh, yeah.
Which nobody's heard of. And they built very few cars, but it's a beautiful car, and it's so far ahead of its time. Templar would have been or could have been a significant product, but their timing was so bad because there was a number of masons, and this is in the Cleveland area. They got together, pooled their money, and they said, you know, building cars is really catching on. So why don't we build a car and let's call it a Templar, Knights Templar. And so they did. The biggest problem is World War One. Okay, so they stole the engineer from the Mercer, and the Mercer was the fastest car, let's say, in racing in the world at the time, beating Stutz and others.
They had the Runabout. I think it was in the Mercer Runabout was one of theirs.
Yeah.
I think. Yep, that was their race car. Yep.
Right. So anyway, they stole that engineer to design their engine, which was an overhead valve engine, 4 liters, which is a big engine for four cylinders. Anyway, so, but the problem with that is World War One, they were unable to source so many things, especially rubber and getting tires. So instead of trying to produce 4,000 the first year, which is the year I have, the Roadster, they built 400. And so they were eventually bought out by General Motors and then went by the wayside.
Now that is a very interesting car. The history behind it too is pretty. Because you've got a lot of accessories that come with it that
I do.
You believe are original to the car.
Yes, and you did a piece on the Templar also.
Yeah, a little bit of research into its history. We found
Yes.
some really interesting things about it, previous owners, and
Yes,
and it ended up taking us back to Cleveland.
it did.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
How many cars do you have?
a dozen.
So
That would include Platypus.
Last time you counted.
you do eventually sell.
I do.
And then what do you look for in somebody who you sell one of your cars to?
Money.
Is that all? You don't.
well, he's got a fun
Not
prop.
that is that all, but there are other layers to it.
No, it depends on the car. You know, if I have very little attachment to it, it's whoever highest bid, you know, and goodbye. So, but other cars, I want to know that it's going to a good home because that was my intention. I put a lot of energy, money into this, and so 3 of my cars went to a museum in Cyprus, which is kind of interesting. And that was through a Bring a Trailer auction.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you just don't know.
No.
And with the internet, you know, the world is your oyster out there.
that's right.
So
Wow.
And then you are working on a really interesting car, you said, an electric vehicle and not modern day.
I guess it's going to arrive today, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's arriving today. I'm not real familiar with it. I've just done a little bit of research about the actual car, but it's very unusual. In the 1917 Roche Lee.
it's a 16.
Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
19. Yeah. So I'll have Dana take over from
Is
here.
this
'cause
another Dana car?
no.
It's a very dear friend of his, but
Yeah.
he's more
Oh,
familiar with
okay.
the car than I am.
Well, Jim Harris found this car on Bring a Trailer. It's a Roush Lang, and it was amazingly original. And the Roush Lang was one of the first electric cars out there. And so when he got this car, you know, it was described beautifully. But when you look at the car and you really study the car, and very little literature came with it, it has the original wiring, which is just totally crazy because we're talking how many 100+ years old?
It'd be all brittle and cracked.
Yes,
And, yeah.
but it was nice. The upholstery was beautiful. And if you want to see it, it'll be arriving at Bruce's shop in about an hour. And the driver sits in the back and your passengers sit in front of you.
That's cool.
And it's got a tiller, not a steering wheel, a tiller. So Jim, trying to get more information on the car, I took him over to the Nethercutt Museum. The Nethercutt has a 1914 Roush Lang, which is the identical body style, identical. So they have it on display in their main showroom, and we took dozens of pictures of that to compare with what he has. And what Bruce is in the process of doing is rebuilding the sideboards on it. So, and I've seen...
Have they just corroded away, or...?
Well, the original sideboards, who knows what happened to them?
Okay.
Maybe they corroded or whatever. But what was on there, I think, was just wood.
Yeah, they just
Right,
put
covered
some,
wood.
Yeah, they just put some.
So based on the photos from the Nethercutt, you guys know what should be there.
Correct.
And that's what you're going to recreate.
And a couple other sources.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you made it sound like it's really big. I mean, I'd love to see images of this. And almost in my mind, I'm picturing a paddy wagon. I mean, it's this tall, right?
That's-
You could-
Well, you see the top of that door right there.
It's
That's the height
Whoa.
7 foot
the
too.
car.
Yes,
So you can stand up in it.
7 foot something.
Yeah, wow.
Oh yeah.
Is it like a truck
Very
or? Is
unusual.
it, I mean, what would you describe it as? Is it a tall car?
Oh, yes.
The very
Yeah.
tall car.
And you said something about because the women would sit in the front with their tall hats. Is that one of the reasons why it's so high?
Well,
Or they just wanted to walk in and be able to walk out of the
but
car?
the seats are sitting at an angle like this, facing backwards.
Yeah.
So I'm just
wow.
envisioning the ladies of the 20s sitting there with their
big-
featherly hats
That's
on.
crazy.
And the driver is like, he's got to look to the left and the right around the ladies.
Around all their hats. I'm just picturing a ton of wiring if this thing is so big, also.
Well, apparently, and I'll find out real soon how much, but
Yeah.
there's several thousand pounds of batteries in this thing. It started out with I think he said 4-volt batteries, and now they've switched over to 12. They've altered it back to
No, they're all 6-volt.
or the 6-volt.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
but
Okay.
one thing that maybe your audience wouldn't know, and maybe you know or don't know, but electric cars were only popular for one reason. Because back then they had a range of maybe 20 miles, okay? So all the other cars in the teens were crank start. Women didn't want to crank start a car. They refused it. So the electric cars were not all owned or driven by women, but mostly. They wanted to get into the game also, and that was the only way to do it.
Well, and even for some guys, it's tough to crank those things over sometimes.
Yeah.
So if you can just push a button and get the thing to start up, that'd be nice.
Was this a barn find?
No, this was in a collection.
Okay.
Oh,
And I think I know the collection that it was in, but that would be a guess.
Okay.
Another interesting factor is that the electric cars are a lot more expensive than the cars that were being made at the time. With something like 1,800. They were like a Model A or whatever was around 750, 800. These were 1,800, so
wow.
more than double the price.
So this was
Tesla owners?
a luxury vehicle back in the day?
It would be considered, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if you could wear your tall hat in it, it better be. with the flowers and the...
So with the max speed is something
feathers.
like 16 miles an hour.
Well, he can get his to 20
Yeah, but he's
downhill.
yeah. So downhill, uphill is like 14.
Hey, Dana and Bruce, isn't it true that back then there was a whole thing with coach builders collaborating with cars? Like we always hear about, a Duesenberg and old Bugattis and stuff. It was like that was like a tradition back then, right? The car manufacturers weren't necessarily doing these opulent interiors on the cars and the coach itself, correct?
Well, there were dozens of coach builders. And so if you were very affluent back then and you wanted to be distinguished somehow, you would buy a drivetrain, let's say from Pierce Arrow or Packard or one of the majors, and you would buy their drivetrain, and then you would go to a coach builder, let's say Durham or Judkins or one of those, and say, okay, I want to build a car specifically for me, and it has to have these characteristics. And they'd have all kinds of panels with colors and so forth. So, and different body styles, and then you could adapt those to what your tastes would be.
So
They would just build-
cars were often bespoke back then, just like getting a suit tailored, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a Judkins built Pierce Arrow, which is a 1928, and it was initially owned by Louis B. Mayer. From,
MGM.
MGM.
Yeah.
And so this was used as a lot car by MGM, in the late 20s. But he designed the car to look like it looks by Judkins, which was a coach builder.
Think of the butts that have been on those seats, right?
Yeah, we,
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
yeah. You said it was Mayer's. There was somebody who was it famous? Was it Clark Gable or somebody who
Clark
loved
Gable.
Was it Clark
Yeah.
Gable who loved
Loved that
being in
car.
Loved that
Yeah.
car. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful car. I love that car too.
Yeah.
Is that really important to you? Also, the history of the car, who owned the car, where it was driven, how it was used.
It's interesting. It gives it some provenance, but when you're selling a car, it's interesting. Sometimes that's going to be a very important factor in pricing. Oftentimes it's not. And I don't know if it's the new generation coming. Louis B. Mayer, who is that? Who cares? So it should be interesting, but oftentimes it's not.
And I think for the newer generation, how do you authenticate, right?
That's a good segue
Yeah, it
about
is.
history of cars
Yeah.
into what Dana is trying to do with other guys that he knows, and like Tony Baker and
Right.
so on and so forth, about the history of cars and racing, especially in Santa Barbara. How long have you been in Santa Barbara? Because you said you came from Chicago.
Right. Well, I arrived. My folks bought a pharmacy in La Cumbre Plaza in 1970. I was in Riverside at the time, and I had just gotten out of the military, so I was driving back and forth, and I thought, hey, this place is pretty cool. Maybe I should move up here. So I did in 73. And
Compared to
never look
Riverside,
back.
right?
Never look back. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to look back at Riverside. No offense to Riverside
Yeah,
people.
no.
But, so and then because Santa Barbara, as you guys know, but our audience probably doesn't know, has a huge history of racing and automotive, just in general. So I don't know, you want to elaborate that on a little bit.
Maybe as the segue, I'm working on a project looking at local racing up and down the coast. And my inspiration for that was, in a way, Tony Baker, after reading his West Coast racing books. And so kind of following his format, which would actually start in Lompoc, just post-World War II, where the Model T Club came into being, and they were very active in the Lompoc area. But then drifting down south, this caught on. A lot of World War II guys, GIs, were looking for something exciting to do. And modifying cars was a big deal. So a lot of other things came to be. One of those was the airport races in Santa Barbara. That was a huge deal. And if you read the billboards on that, some of the most prominent racers in the world came to Santa Barbara to race at those racing events. So, and then there's Bonneville Racing, and Seth is part of that. And
Who we hope to have on at some point.
right.
Be
And then,
great to have him on.
his book starts out with Sam Foose and his customizations. And so we know Chip Foose, obviously, and I'd love to have him on that program. And it goes on to drag racing and other kinds of racing, SCCA racing. So, and we've got a huge pool of experts, including Lee Hammock, who actually raced at the Thunder Bowl, which has been gone for 70 or 80 years now.
That was in Santa
But
Barbara.
that was in Carpinteria. So, I mean, he's still alive, very, very active, and he'd be a great one to have on a panel.
And we've
Yeah.
talked about wanting to just document these stories
Yeah.
because they're here and
Yeah.
they're the
Well,
ones to tell them.
Yeah, and my vision was to have a panel of all these guys together and just go one by one, maybe you as the moderator.
Oh, I would do it in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and then just go one by one, and I think it would be extremely exciting, but it would, especially in a historical vein,
Yeah.
Yeah.
to get it recorded, because nobody lasts forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's people, myself included, up until a few years ago, realizing how popular Santa Barbara was, Ventura, in the racing community, and how many big names came out of these areas or came to the area to race or to work on their cars, and how many manufacturers. I mean, people didn't know that Magnuson was here still here, and Jerry, how he's a big state. I ran into him at restaurants here for lunch and stuff like that. So it's kind of cool that a lot of people don't know that how much history is in our Santa Barbara, Ventura County.
We'd like to
area.
change that and let people know about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, anything we could do to be a part of that panel and help you out, because I think that would be a huge deal, just to capture that and to share those stories.
Well, luckily, one of my friends became Andy Granatelli. And how I met Tony Baker is a spinoff from Andy Granatelli, which doesn't make a lot of sense in a way. But when he died, I worked with his son, Vince. And Vince had a hangar over in the Phoenix area. And it had, the hangar was just full of trophies and memorabilia and cars. And, it was just amazing how much stuff. And then Vince had his jet in there, and it was piled all around with Andy's stuff. And he says, I got to get rid of some of this stuff. And I said, you know what? The Murphy Auto Museum may be very interested. And he said, you know what? You can have it all.
Wow.
But you have to pay for the transportation over. Okay, I'll do it. So we still have a lot of Andy Granatelli. And how Tony Baker comes into this, I didn't have time. I was owning and running my Alzheimer's facility. And so I contacted Tony Baker, and I said, Tony, can you and I work on this to catalog all this stuff and inventory it? And he was just gung-ho.
Wow.
Because part of this inventory were thousands of videotapes of different events, including Indy 500s and other races. And we still have those.
Wow.
And talk about history.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Big time.
That's so cool.
So often families dump this stuff away, and it's gone.
It's
So
gone
that's
forever.
wonderful
Yeah.
to have kept
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's our whole mission here, is to capture every story that we can humanly capture right now.
And you can go over and see it right now at the Murphy. They got a whole room and a hallway dedicated to Andy Granatelli. And there's still a lot more than what they've displayed. So it's pretty fun.
Right.
A lot of STP stuff.
A lot of STP, yes.
STP.
I remember STP stickers. My
Oh,
parents
yeah.
had them all over the place growing
Still
up.
got 'em, yeah.
And Andy Granatelli's full outsuit, just like everything's STP stamped everywhere.
Yeah.
I remember that as a kid.
Yeah.
And seeing the photos of it over the Murphy is pretty
Yeah,
fun.
it is.
Boy, it's been so much fun having you two on. Dana Newquist, Bruce Terry, thank you again for coming down and joining us and talking about Platypus. So we're looking forward a year from now. Keep your fingers crossed. We're going to have you
that's-
stop by west of Tulsa and
We'll do a check-in in
Well,
6 months. See what
a year from now, I hope to be pulling that into your parking lot.
Yeah.
That's what we hope
Wait
for.
to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll hear the rumble of that 48 flathead coming in.
Gonna be interesting.
It'll have glass packs.
Yeah. You'll be driving. Bruce is going to be on the roof waving flags and stuff like
Oh yeah. How do you plan to back that thing up since you can't see in the back?
I've got a camera.
Oh, you're gonna put a oh, so you're gonna have some tech on there. Some
I have
Hidden
to.
tech, yeah.
gotcha.
You know, but yeah, I mean, you know, putting some truck mirrors on the side, that's not going to.
Yeah.
So
It is a great name, platypus, a mammal that lays eggs. Right? How unique.
comes out of nowhere.
yeah, it does.
I love it. All right.
like
Well,
it.
thank you guys. All right. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, we've got if you go to our website, you can go to our tip line page. We'd love to have you in studio. I should have done this at the top because nobody ever sees this part.
Yeah.
I never make it to
It's
the
all right. It's all right. When
What did
you
you say last time? We had only one person who's made it to end one of our shows.
Yeah, and I
God, that
think it was
stinks.
me. So
Okay. So we have their tip line page. Go there, put your name in it, fill it out, send it in to us. We'd love to have you here in studio. Also, like, follow, subscribe. And we have our YouTube.
channel.
Thank you very much. And we thank you. And we'll see you west of Tulsa.